they asked me one time, had I thought much about baptism
Right.
in the Anglican tradition? And I said, not yet. And they said, that's going to be your big struggle. That was my big struggle, because they came from a background, as I was coming from a background, that it's an adult activity because it's a conscious decision to proclaim to the world that you have chosen to welcome Christ into your life and to follow Christ and live for Christ. So that's not something an infant can do. I've kind of come to the point where I don't try to talk people who believe in adult baptism out of it, but I guess push them a bit to think more of God's grace in the presence of what's happening.
Today we're talking about baptism, which can be sometimes something that maybe feels a little bit empty, or like an old kind of thing that we still do, but we don't always necessarily know why or think about. Is it superstitious? We dip people in water and we say that they're now clean, but it still is important. It's still something we do. It's at least 2,000-year-old ritual, if not longer.
Probably longer.
Can we simply reduce it to, as we often hear it said, like an outward sign of like an inner change, or as a profession of faith? Or is there more to it than that? Is there something deeper to it? And then specifically, since we're coming at this from an Anglican perspective, what can we say about baptism as a sacrament? Because that is one of the sacraments in the church. What does that mean? What does that look like? Why do we baptize little children and infants sometimes? We know that can be hard for people to accept. So that's kind of what we're here to explore today. And we've talked about this in the past in a previous episode with a parishioner, Dick Martin. So if you want to go back and listen to that to get a bit of a refresher on that conversation, that would be a great idea. But we're here to explore it a little bit more today. So I'm Trevor.
And I'm Al.
And welcome to Pray Tell. Al, could you maybe get us started today with maybe an introduction to why we do baptism and what it means as like an entry into church, and talk about this sacrament idea?
I think first I want to acknowledge that it's complex, right? So I think we need to acknowledge that there are varied theological views around baptism. And it's the challenge with theology is that we like to think that it's kind of black and white, right? That A is right and anything else is out of line. And we get challenged when we realize, oh, wait a minute, it's more complex than that. And I think that's what happens in baptism. I was thinking about this before we started today, and I thought I might share a story that a colleague shared in a sermon one time. He was in a small town parish, and that had big enough that the town had a little hospital, and he was sort of the on-call chaplain along with a couple of other clergy from different churches. And he had a call to come because a woman was pregnant, and well, she was very close to delivery, but something had medically challenging, and they asked if he would come. She was not a member of his church. He got to meet her briefly and pray with her, and then she had to get rushed off for surgery because her life was in danger and the infant's life was in danger. Anyway, what ended up happening was the mother lived, the baby was born, but didn't live very long. And so the mother called him up after and said to him on the phone, one of the first things she said was, "So are you the priest that's going to baptize my baby?" And he's stunned because the baby he knew was deceased. And he was going to give her a theological lesson. And instead he just said, "Yeah, I'm the priest that's going to come and talk to you about what's next." And then he realized this woman is in deep grief. And it's not a time for me to correct her theology. It's a time for me to celebrate the grace of God, which I think ultimately is what baptism is. So he did confess in front of the bishop, actually, that he broke the theology of the church and he did baptize this deceased infant, and he prayed with the family, and he officiated at the burial of the infant, which he said goes against all his theological understanding. But God's grace was present in that. And in a sense, I think when he was in tears sharing it in the sermon because it was so powerful. But I think that touches at the heart of it. We can have thinking about baptism, but it doesn't take away from the grace that's there, that sort of supersedes all of that. So I think at the heart of baptism, whether one believes in adult baptism or infant baptism, there's a few questions at the heart. Is this a necessity for my salvation? The answer is no. It was not a necessity for that infant who had gone into God's presence without really knowing much about life at all, or just experiencing a few minutes of life. It was not a necessity. So it raises those questions that we struggle with. And I think part of it is, we think we have to do something for God. And that impacts a lot of our decisions.
That story, it feels like you said it raises some questions that we have to think about, but I think it also demonstrates how some of these questions and debates we have just don't matter.
Yeah.
Right? We should be able to, in that moment, we can put aside all of these controversies or disagreements we have about it. And you said, it's about recognizing the grace of God in that moment.
Exactly. And it was, he admitted, it was a struggle for him. I mean, he wanted to correct the thinking, but realized it's not a time to do that. It's a time to celebrate that God has not abandoned this woman, God has not abandoned this infant, God has not abandoned this family, and they're in deep pain, and God enters the pain.
Some conversations I've had with people I know who struggle with this idea of infant baptism, like that we do here, it's sometimes the hang up is no, it has to be this personal decision that you make when you understand the full scope of what baptism means. But then in that story, and again, I think what I've come to understand about it, why we do it, is it's not it's about belonging as part of a community and being welcomed into as a full member of a community that can participate in the life of that community, and the people in that community who are there to say and affirm, we will help you and support you and guide you. And I think that's kind of the big takeaway in recent years I've kind of taken about why we do this and why we baptize infants. It's not something that I personally ever had a big hang up about, though, but I know other people do. And I don't know why that is for me, but that's just kind of how I've come to settle on things with it.
When I was, as I'd said before in other podcasts, I'm not a cradle Anglican. I came as an adult, and I didn't enter seminary as an Anglican, but I was exploring that. And so my placement as a student was in a parish where the priest also had gone through a similar, I guess, transition theologically. They came from a Baptist background, and the priest had said to me, getting to know them, working with them as a student in their parish, that they asked me one time, had I thought much about baptism in the Anglican tradition? And I said, not yet. And they said, that's going to be your big struggle. That was my big struggle, because they came from a background, as I was coming from a background, that it's an adult activity because it's a conscious decision to proclaim to the world that you have chosen to welcome Christ into your life and to follow Christ and live for Christ. So that's not something an infant can do. So they were right. It was a theological challenge for me. And I think I've kind of come to the point where I don't try to talk people who believe in adult baptism out of it.
Yeah.
But I guess pushed them a bit to think more of God's grace
Right.
in the presence of what's happening. And I guess if they want to have a big discussion, I think you need to go back to the roots of baptism, right? Because I mean, we think of it as a Christian sacrament, but it was a Jewish practice that we assimilated and sort of put our own understanding on, which is different than a Jewish understanding. And I think we need to see, I think what's helped me the most is sort of trying to get a handle on how radical John the Baptist was and why that was controversial for him to be in the wilderness, calling people out and baptizing them when baptism was practiced. And I think it was someone who was born into a Jewish family and followed the, if it was male, ritual of circumcision and acceptance into the faith, they did not baptize. They were not baptized.
Right.
It was a convert who was baptized. And but the convert baptized themselves. Ritual cleansing was a sign of needing to be cleansed to come into God's presence. And so a convert to Judaism would enter, it was a full immersion, baptismal. There are some found in archaeological digs that you walk in and walk out, and they would baptize themselves. So John the Baptist is in the wilderness, the son of a priest who should be in the temple, learning the ropes as a priest, out in the wilderness, calling anybody, Jew or Gentile. And he's baptizing them, not something you do yourself, which I think is for me a sign that this is actually about God's grace, not something we do for God, something God's doing for us. And he was bearing witness to Jesus.
I also came from that background, like where you had to make that decision as maybe not an adult, but someone who understood. So for me, I think I was 14, and just thinking of where I'm at now and where I've come from, and that that thought or idea that it needs to be something that you understand. I think what I see now is that, well, confirmation is like where you get to express or understand maybe what that whole thing meant for you all those years ago, whenever it happened, if it did happen when you were younger. But I don't know, that can still be hard for people to kind of accept. And then maybe another element of this too is, well, if I've already been baptized in a different tradition, do I bother if I join, or do I need to?
Yeah, and that's been controversial through the centuries, because there are some will say, no, baptism is universally recognized.
Yeah.
And others that will say, well, if it's an adult baptism, it's universally recognized. But if it's not, then it's, if the person was an infant, they didn't comprehend. But as you say, there are other ways for someone when they begin to realize who Jesus is and come in a relationship with him consciously as an adult, whether it's a young adult or whatever age that sort of dawns on a person. There are other ways to express that you are choosing to follow Christ and choosing to have him in your life, and choosing to be his disciple, which I think also erases this whole controversial thing. Do we ever do something for God, or is it just that the Lord is constantly calling us to open our hearts and to welcome the Lord into our lives, and that we're just responding to the work that Jesus is doing? It's kind of 0% us and 100% Jesus, in which case that kind of neutralizes the argument against infant baptism. But
that might be a struggle for people, because in a way it's like a giving up of some agency they have in the whole thing, right? And we don't generally like to do that.
Which is why it can be a very controversial topic we've opened here.
Yeah. So with that, just makes me wonder, like, why even if it's something God does for us, why even bother doing the actual physical act of baptism? Like, what is it about that? Is it just about like the symbolism of it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that's the definition of a sacrament, right? It's the outward and visible sign of God's inward and invisible grace. So we have, as Christians, developed a lot of theology around the symbolism of baptism. And we do, when we're part of a congregation that has a baptism, we, at least as Anglicans, those present renew their baptismal vows.
Right.
So for an infant, the sponsors and parents are making the vows, and all of that acknowledges God's grace. And so the symbolism, the water is always a symbol of cleansing. If it's a full immersion, we have this symbol, which was certainly not part of what John the Baptist was doing, of dying with Christ and rising to new life. We have that symbol within, because we can't live underwater.
Yep.
And so there's cleansing, there's water gives us life. I mean, there's all kinds of symbols there that we can talk about theologically. But I think underlying all of it, it's to remind us and to point us to God working in our lives. Because I think we're all pretty quick throughout the day to forget about that. So it's good to have those reminders.
About a year and a half ago, my wife and I, we were asked to be sponsors for really good friends of ours. Their children, they go to a Lutheran church. And so I remember during that service when we went for that, you were talking about like how we renew our baptism vows. And it was interesting to be in the position of being like a sponsor, because that was the first time we had ever been asked to do that or had done that. And our oldest daughter has been baptized, but not our youngest one yet. And I remember thinking back to that time, like, we have to pick sponsors or a sponsor. Like, who do you pick? Like, who does it have to be? And so there was all these questions. And then to be in that position as the person who is asked to do it felt like there is some responsibility there, that you do have to take seriously, because as you said, like, it's not just the parents making these vows, it's the sponsors too.
Yeah.
And so we had to like kind of think carefully of who are the people in our children's lives that we want to share that responsibility with. So a question I have is it common to baptize people or people's children who aren't like regular attenders of your church? Like, if they just kind of show up and are like, hey, we really want to do this?
That's a challenging thing as a clergy person, because the vows would indicate that it's not a one-off thing. It's not magic. It's not a one-off scenario here, that the person, there needs to be some connection to a Christian community, because we're in it together and we remind each other in our relationships, especially when we gather to worship, of God working in our life, that Christ is present among us. We're celebrating that. So if it's baptism, but no intent of doing that, well, is that a sense of you think you're doing something magical? That's not what it is. So I think that there is a necessity to kind of flush that out a bit. And and I know as a as a priest in a previous church, I did have a scenario like that, where the family was upfront about saying, no, they weren't Christian, but they wanted their child to get baptized. And so I raised that point of, well, no, we couldn't say what the sponsors say. I said, well, then I can't baptize your child, because they were very upset with me. But anyway, but they didn't understand. They didn't understand that baptism isn't an individual thing. It is part of the community. We don't do private baptism. There may have been a time when, during the pandemic, a family asked, and we weren't supposed to have, more than whatever, 9 people plus the officiant present, or might not even been that many for services, unless they were a family unit.
Sure.
We might have stretched the family unit
Yeah.
part a bit, but we did agree that, okay, at that point in time, we had no idea when the person could get baptized. So we did it. I mean, but we had there was 15 or 20 of us.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be a community thing.
Yeah. That, just that idea of it being a public or community thing just reminds me. So I was actually baptized in the Nanaimo River, because summer camp, so
Yep.
you were talking about that a little while ago. I used to go to summer camp close to Nanaimo every year, and every day we walked a couple kilometers to go swim in the river. And so every year, a few people during the week would be baptized. And there's always other just people at the beach there.
Yep.
And thinking about it now, it's just like some people must just be wondering what is going on.
Yes. Yeah.
You know? But they always were like super respectful and just kind of quietly watched. And I'd be curious to kind of know if I could ask someone who had seen some of those, like, what is your thought process? Like, what are you wondering? Because this is like, we have maybe 50 people there, 60 people from the camp that are all there to witness and be there. But then there's maybe 20 other just people who came to the beach that day hoping to just, swim. And all of a sudden this person's getting dipped underwater and people are praying, all this stuff. And so I think that's, it's always a unique way of doing it publicly when you do it somewhere like that.
Yes.
And I know other churches will, go to the lake or the ocean or something and do it that way too. But how do you, I guess a question I have is like, do you think that is a useful public witness sort of tool to do? If that shouldn't be the purpose of it, obviously, but
no.
What are your thoughts regarding things?
Well, I did say once in a conversation at a parish I was at that had a mix of people from different backgrounds and some that, were not having their infants baptized, thought they should. So we were having similar kind of discussion about all of this. And anyway, I did say to them at one point, I said, if we really want to be traditional, when we're going to have a baptism, whether it's an adult or whether it's an infant, whoever, we should go to the mall and use the fountain. And I was being, pushing a little bit there. I thought, and that might not go so well, but the sense of thinking that that's the way the early church did it. I mean, within Judaism, they did have baptismal tanks, like you would walk in and walk out, pools, right? Yeah. But Christians, in early baptism, did it in a river or somewhere. They weren't allowed to use those. So it was a public thing.
What's the difference between sprinkling water versus full immersion or whatever other ways? Like, is it the Orthodox Church where they take the baby and they dunk it under? Have you ever seen videos of that?
I have seen videos. They full immersion the
full
baby.
Immersion.
Yeah. Quickly, so the baby doesn't get a breath of water. Yeah. But they do that. I mean, full immersion has a lot of symbolism in it. And was John the Baptist doing full immersion? I don't think we really know. I mean, I've done them where it's full immersion and you lay the person back and bring them up.
Yep.
Was that the way John the Baptist did it? Or did he just put the person under for a second? And I have read, whether this is legend or fact, that the not doing full immersion, sprinkling of the water, came from when the Christians got spread out. I mean, early they would go to the Jordan River because that's where Jesus was baptized, and that's where John the Baptist did baptism. So if you could take some water from the Jordan River and haul it somewhere else, well, you wouldn't have enough to do an immersion, but you'd have enough to pour it over the person. So that's where the sprinkling came from, that it was water from the Jordan. Yeah. And apparently the Jordan River has less water for people hauling water out of there all over the world for baptism, whether it came from that or not. And then different symbolism gets built around that. Of course, we haven't touched on the issue that I just mentioned there about Jesus being baptized, which raises other questions theologically.
Right. So what are those?
Well, if we think of baptism as something we're doing for God,
Yeah.
as a sign of saying I'm repenting from my sin and I'm being cleansed, it makes no sense for Jesus to be baptized.
So
But if
Yeah.
Jesus is bearing witness to the grace of God coming into our lives
mhm,
and fully participates in everything we do,
mhm,
including this witness of submitting to John the Baptist, who protested at the baptism of
mhm,
Jesus. He did not want to do it. As I said, in Judaism, you cleansed yourself, but here they're acknowledging, I need help. And he's saying to Jesus, no, 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 you do not need any help.
mhm.
And Jesus is saying, no, I'm participating in this reality that this is all about grace, all of it. It's about what God's doing for humanity through Jesus.
Hmm.
So it's not a repentance of sin, it's an acknowledgement of grace.
So as that part of it has that come in later on then? I guess the whole repentance piece.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why I say it's a complex picture,
Hmm.
and it's divided Christians through the centuries.
Yeah.
And as we've acknowledged, continues. I mean, both you
Yeah.
and I have had in our life theological and experiences struggle with our understanding of baptism.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be a surprise that it's not a. It's something that unifies us and something that divides us at the same time.
Sure. Like everything
Yeah.
in church, it seems.
Yeah.
Maybe this is another one of those things that divides people on the topic of baptism. What is unique about the water we use? Is there anything unique about it?
Well, I think the uniqueness can come from, water from the Jordan. I remember when I was first ordained, coming from a background where only adults were baptized, that's the way we had approached it as a family. So my
Mhm.
children were not baptized.
Yeah.
And I was an assistant priest at a church with a very cradle Anglican law-abiding letter of the law kind of priest.
Mm-hmm.
Found out my children weren't baptized and thought, well, they better get baptized. And they were ranged in age at that point, I think, from about 7 to 13 or 14. So I thought, well, they're kind of in a age. And he did baptismal prep with them. And I thought, well, there was God's grace, because it was announced. I didn't know this. It was announced the day that they were being baptized. And I didn't do the baptism. He did. I was a parent supporting
Yes.
them and giving the vows, but the water came from the Jordan. Somebody in the
Okay.
congregation had been to Israel and brought back water from
Huh.
the Jordan, and that was used at that baptism.
Interesting.
And I thought, oh, well, that was very gracious, God, because it wasn't full immersion, which is what I would have preferred, but it was water from the Jordan, which I thought, yeah, I would have chose that over full immersion. So I think the water has, the symbol of the water and what that means, it's going to vary from person to person. It's going to vary from how it's done, whether it's full immersion or whether it's a font, and
Mm-hmm.
where the water came from. And but like I say, it's not magic.
No.
It's a witness to God in
Mhm.
Christ and what God has done for us.
Is the water that we use for baptism in the Anglican Church, is it blessed in some way by the
It's
bishop?
part of the no.
Or-
It's blessed as part of the service.
Yes.
By the priest that's officiating at the
Okay.
service. So blessing of the water is built into the service, and the blessing includes it's not a prayer I have memorized because I don't do it that often, but it includes a thanksgiving for water, a thanksgiving for life,
Yeah.
a thanksgiving for God's actions in history, deliverance, and cleansing. It's all built into the blessing
Okay.
of the water.
So that's going to take us to the end of our conversation, I think, today on baptism, because there's so many things that we could, or ways that we could continue to explore the topic and have other conversations about things and anger more people who maybe listen. So I think we'll wrap it up for today. But we encourage anyone listening to share your thoughts, your maybe disagreements, questions you have for us, and we'll take the time to look at those and maybe even address them too. So we know this is a big topic for a lot of people, and it's something that we all want to take the time to think about carefully.
Yeah, and I think the important thing about topics like this, which can be controversial, is to be open to one another and to realize we're all trying to celebrate our relationship with Jesus, what Jesus has done for us, ways of expressing that, ways of bearing witness to that. And so I think just opening up the conversation and being open to see that there's not a formula for how God works in our lives, because we're also individual and also unique, but we do celebrate that Jesus comes to us and gives us life.
So if you want to come check out St. Matthew, we'd love to have you. We're in Abbotsford, BC at 2010 Guilford Drive. Maybe one Sunday you'll show up and we'll be having a baptism, because we do have them every so often.
Every so often, yeah.
But thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.